Hello, Deepak. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rajiv.
And it's a real honor to have you on this show. And I've wanted to do this for a very long time.
I'm grateful.
I want people to know Deepak just launched this book, MetaHuman. And I don't read too many books nowadays because of too much schedule. But this book, once I started reading, there's no way I could stop it. It's just one of those books you just go on and on. It's a remarkable book. We'll discuss this in length. But I first want to tell people that I have known Deepak for quite a while. Because as a student of physics and philosophy, I was very interested in his work from the very beginning. His quantum healing, perfect health, made a big impact not only in the whole US, but on me personally. But the turning point, one of the important transformational points in my life was when I was in a very hectic business, running around the world. I came back from a trip, and my staff had a gift bag in front of me or sitting at the table. I opened it, and this was a retreat at the Deepak Chopra Center in La Jolla, which had just opened up. And they said, we bought this as a gift for you. Now you have to go and do this. It was about a 10-day kind of thing. So I went there, and the center in La Jolla had just opened. And there was one, I think he was Dr. Simon. There was one person like that. And he was involved in this. And then there was another one who was very interested in neuro-linguistic programming in those days. And so these were a couple of guys. The whole thing was just 10 guests. And we were like a family. We ate together. We meditated a lot. And that was my first panchakarma. I've had several since, but that was my first panchakarma. And Deepak's daughter, who was at that time a student, was teaching meditation and initiating people in meditation. So I remember all this. At the panchakarma treatment table, I had some extraordinary experiences. I've had them a few times in my life when I was growing up in various places, and this was one of them. And this had such an impact on me that when I came home, my wife said, "You've never looked so relaxed, so fresh, so detoxed, and what's happened to you," kind of things. I also learned there was a family picture of his, and in that family picture of his, as a young boy, his tie told me that he came from the same school. So we also compared notes on our schooling. I think, Deepak, I want to say, in my eyes, you played the pioneering role in bringing to the Western medicine what Western medicine was not willing to accept at that time. There was this fortress mentality of a very reductionist, materialistic approach to the human body, organ at a time. And you were teaching them holistic, mind, body, spirit, meditation, Ayurveda, all these terms. Today, the walls have come down quite a bit, I would say, and people take it for granted. But I think it's important to acknowledge the history of people who played a pioneering role. So my first question to you, Deepak, is if you go back in time, what were some of the milestones in bringing this new kind of holistic healing wellness concept to the Western medicine system?
So it's been a very interesting journey, and I can summarize it shortly. But as you know, Rajiv, first of all, great to see you again after all these years. But to go in the backstory a little bit, my training was in internal medicine, and then endocrinology, and then neuroendocrinology. I'm board certified in internal medicine, endocrinology, neuroendocrinology. I have a practice and a position at the University of California for integrative medicine, and licenses to practice in Massachusetts and California. Actually, right now applying for licenses in New York as well to further what we are teaching. In any case, my background was that, and in the 70s, when I was doing my training, we were looking at brain chemistry, and we were looking at molecules that everybody is now familiar with: serotonin, opiates, oxytocin, dopamine. We also knew at that time that these molecules were um, immunomodulators, that they modified the function of the immune system. So one of my colleagues at that time mentioned the word molecules of emotion. And that hit me as an epiphany. It wasn't my expression, but she used it. She later became the chief of brain chemistry at NIH, Candice Pert. She's passed on since then for various other reasons. But in any case, that struck a chord, and it was also obvious to me at that time that you could have two patients who received the same treatment for the same illness from the same doctor, but could have completely different outcomes. So at that moment, 1985, is when I wrote my first book. It was called Creating Health, The Mind-Body Connection. Actually, first publication was, what should I say, a vanity publication, because nobody would accept the book for publication. None of the publishers. So I published it myself for $5,000. And somebody found it in a bookstore at the Harvard Coop, gave it to their mother as a gift. And the mother happened to be a literary agent. And she said, how come this book is not by a regular publisher? I said, nobody could get me a regular publisher. So she said, how much did you pay for it? I said, $5,000 for 100 copies. She said, I'll get you $5,000 and I'll get you a publisher. The book became a national bestseller and was followed by another book, Quantum Healing, 1988, which also, and then that suddenly got me my presence into the publishing world. I got a call from Jackie Onassis, and she said, why are you with Houghton Mifflin? You should be with a New York publisher. I met her, I met Stephen Hawking's editor, on. And suddenly things took over. Academia attacked me, but I kind of survived the attack from academia. And now we are here 25 years later talking about epigenetics and neuroplasticity and gene modification and the microbiome. So it's a long history, but your experience of panchakarma is a very classical experience. Your skin and your brain come from the same germ layer. It's called the neuroectoderm. So whatever happens in the skin is registered, and a skin is our organ of what we call touch. But all the five senses, that's why it's called panchakarma, five senses actually are organs of touch. With your eyes, you touch the sky through photons. With your nose, you touch chemicals and you experience fragrance. With your tongue, you touch chemicals and you experience taste. With your skin, you experience sensation. And with your eyes, you experience form and phenomena. So actually, panchakarma and the other activities of panchakarma, as you said, are detox, but in fact, they reorganize what we call fundamental experiences in the body that have dramatic consequences. Now, 25 years later, we've done research and we find that during, say, a week of panchakarma, if you also combine it with meditation, all the genes that cause self-regulation go up significantly. Some genes go up 17-fold over baseline. No drug can do that. Then some genes go down significantly, and they're responsible for inflammation. Inflammation is directly connected to chronic and acute illness, and to depression, and to anxiety. So within a week, you actually change your entire genome activity. You don't change the genes, you change the genome activity. Like the genes you got from your parents is like the cards you are dealt with in a poker game. But how you play them is what activates the genes or deactivates the genes. That's called epigenetics. So today we are exactly know how panchakarma works. We also know how meditation works. We also know that there's an enzyme at the level of our genes called telomerase, which regulates how we age. In our studies, telomerase went up 40%. And, you know, some of the studies we did with a Nobel laureate in medicine and physiology, her name is Elizabeth Blackburn. She ended up writing a book called The Telomere Effect. So Panchakarma not only detoxifies you, it reinvents the body, it resurrects the soul, it decreases inflammation, and it actually causes reversal of biological age. I mean, this is a huge promise, but it does that, and Ayurveda has known this for thousands of years. What we are finding now is a scientific validation, but even more interesting, by the way, my personal journey, starting with endocrinology, neuroendocrinology, my years with Maharishi, my years with the Vaidyas in India, my years with Vedic astrologers, all these people actually gave me a glimpse that I was not even scratching the surface. Mind-body medicine is not even scratching the surface because body-mind are one unit. It's not mind and body. It's like space-time or mass energy or wave particle. That's one thing. And you know that as a physicist. Body-mind is one entity. But it's not who we are. There's a more fundamental level of awareness from which both body-mind appear on the screen of consciousness as appearances or activities. That's the gift of Vedanta, and that's the gift of Kashmir Shaivism, that's the gift of Tantra, that actually your body is not made of matter. In fact, nothing is made of matter. Your body is not made of energy. In fact, nothing is made of energy. Your body is not made of information. In fact, nothing is made of information. You are made of consciousness and only consciousness, as is the rest of the universe. You and the universe are consciousness, period. Brahman, Brahman. The rest is human constructs. And it takes millennia to actually overcome the hypnosis or the bamboozlement of the superstition of matter. It literally, matter is a very useful, magical lie. So is the universe, a very useful, practical, magical lie. But it's a lie. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as matter, energy, information, space-time, all the constructs. From Einstein himself was a naive realist. Now, I'm taking a liberty of saying that, and I'm getting attacked. How dare you attack Einstein? But recently, I'm having conversations with cognitive scientists, and we all agree that Einstein was one of the greatest geniuses of the world, but he was a naive realist. His most famous statement, the moon would still exist if no one was looking at it. Well, he was wrong. The moon does not exist. Every time you look at the moon, you create the moon. And it's your moon, not my moon.
Deepak, the transformation in society, my take is that it was bottom up that you created, not top down. It was not that some people in the pharma world or FDA world or academic world bought this and they changed. I think you went straight to the masses, and the appeal to the common person was so strong because they were sick of this old straitjacket idea, reductionist idea of who we are. And so you were at the right place at the right time, giving a very profound message. And my sense is that it's the patients who went and educated their doctors. And the doctors went and educated the universities and said, hey, we better expand our concept of medical education. Do you think there is some truth in that this was a popular movement which the medical establishment was forced to accept?
Yes, it was a popular movement, and the medical establishment first realized that if they didn't at least verbally embrace it, it would be bad PR because there were so many people wanting it. We know actually even then that 70% of people actually went to what are called alternative or integrative practitioners. So first, the medical establishment embraced it only because of survival reasons, commercial reasons. Then academia got interested because academia said, let's see if there's scientific validation. So we've come full circle. It started with the common person, then it went to medical hospitals and institutions, and finally it's back in academia. And I don't think there's an academic institution today that doesn't look at integrative medicine. But it was a bottoms-up approach. You're absolutely right.
And it was a huge fight for you because I saw and I read a lot that it was sometimes one guy against a whole lot of people who were pushing back. and calling all kind of names and just not willing to let go of this obsession to attack this, because I guess they were threatened. This is the model they are taught. This has been taught for a long time, and here comes somebody from nowhere, and he's telling them it's all wrong. It's all kind of illusory, and they're not willing to accept it. So that's a major contribution.
Well, it's true, but also what is true is, Rajiv, that after a while I started to ignore the critics because that would have held me back. I just did what I felt was the truth, and then, it got validated. So, as you said, I was in the right place at the right time. Also, what people didn't realize when my attackers, like Richard Dawkins and all the professional skeptics, they call me a pseudoscientist. They call me a dangerous person, but they didn't have the insight that what I was saying was not really made up. It was partly my insights, but it comes from wisdom traditions that have been there for thousands of years and that have worked. And they've improved, they've actually affected the quality of life from what you and I will call dukkha to sukha, from
Right.
suffering to peace and equanimity and joy and healing. There's no reductionist method that looks at how do you eliminate suffering. In fact, I can't even say that as a physician, that I will eliminate your suffering. I can't even tell you that I will cure your disease. I can only tell you I'll practice. That's what medicine is, a practice. That you never say you'll cure, or you never say you'll alleviate suffering. You only say you'll treat or you'll practice. Well, then what good is a doctor for? What good is a healer for if he can't heal or she can't heal?
Right. I want to talk about the philosophy of MetaHuman. That's what I really would love to talk about. So I found that when I read this book, it consolidated a whole lot of things that you've taught over the years, a whole lot of things that you've taught, put together in a nice framework. A few questions I have. Is MetaHuman a momentary experience? Like people get an epiphany, they have an enlightenment, a moment of enlightenment, they have super consciousness, like I had at the treatment during Panchakarma. But that was momentary, because when I come back after a few days, the ego is back, the ego project is back. And then I have to remind myself, oops, the other thing was better. So it comes and goes. Is it that, or is MetaHuman a permanent transformation?
Yes, the permanent transformation is referred to as self-realization. Okay,
Yes.
it is what is also called moksha in Sanskrit, also called Jivan Mukti. So Jivan Mukti, moksha, self-realization is a permanent transformation. But there are peak moments which you have, and those peak moments not only in Panchakarma or meditation, they occur to musicians, they occur to athletes, they occur to entertainers, they occur to poets, they occur to songwriters, they occur when you're in nature. They occur to children all the time, by the way. Children have peak moments all the time. And the characteristic of a peak moment is temporarily there's loss of ego identity. Two, that's one. Two, you feel one with all that exists. Three, there's heightening of sensory experience and everything becomes luminous and radiant. Four, time slows down or even stops. Five, you can't hear anything for the moment. And six, at that moment, you lose the fear of mortality because you have touched something that is not in space-time, and that is your own soul, or what we call jiva, atma. Now, that occurs all the time in children, in athletes, in poets, in moments of revelation, in epiphany. When it becomes permanently established, even as you are navigating experience in the domain or theater of space-time and causality, which is this experience we are having. But if you are staying grounded in that non-local domain, then you are metahuman. Metahuman, I just made up the word. Meta means beyond. Human means beyond the human conditioned mind, beyond the
Right.
human ego mind. So actually now we have neural correlates for this. When people have these experiences, there's a part of the brain called the default mode network, or DMN, and DMN gets very quiet. It's not activated, which means your ego acts through your brain, through this part of your body, which gets deactivated, and suddenly you feel connected with all that exists. That is a metahuman moment.
One could say, I've had this moment, but the underlying habits, the underlying memories are not gone, and therefore they pull me back. So, or is this that one has evolved to a different species or a different kind of creature, such or non-creature, beyond all creatures, such that the creature-ness which brought me back has gone. It's been deleted, erased permanently, and now I'm in a different plane. Which of these two is it?
It's actually both. You can be both. There's a common expression in religious literature to be in this world or not of it. Teilhard de Chardin, the Christian theologian, said, I'm
Right.
a spiritual being. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. So we are all spiritual beings having a human experience, which means we are consciousness modulating itself as this experience, the body, mind, and experience of the world. So as we recognize this, there's a ripening of experience where you are simultaneously in the world and not of it. So the glimpse that we mentioned, the glimpse that you had, that's called Turiya,
Right.
which means transcendental consciousness, beyond space and time. But when you're firmly established in it, that's called Turiya Tatta. So the Turiya is now there all the time, in waking, in dreaming, and sleeping. Even when your body is fast asleep or is dreaming, the silent witnessing awareness, which we call Sakshi, is there. And there's a recognition that I'm not the body-mind world experience. I'm the awareness in which that experience is recycling itself. As a result, there's loss of fear of death. But Turiya Tatta is not the end either. Beyond that, something called Bhagavad Chetna. Bhagavad Chetna means divine consciousness, where this local soul identity is connected to the source of all soul identities. And beyond that, there's something called Brahmi Chetna, which means suddenly there's the recognition that the witnessing awareness in you and the witnessing awareness in me and the witnessing awareness in every sentient being is the same. And that is projecting what we call the universe, Brahman, Brahmand. Okay, that is a progressive journey, but it's a very exciting journey. It's like a fruit that is ripening all the time, and then one day it falls. And one day it falls, it knows what we call reality. It understands that the world is what we call Jagat Mithya. It's a world appearance. It's not real. And who's
Brilliant.
in charge? Who is constructing it? You are constructing it. The consciousness conceives, constructs, governs, and becomes what we call mind, body, and universe. And you know that. That is ultimate self-realization.
So what we are calling transformation is not like something ceases to exist, something else comes. It is actually a cognitive shift.
Yeah, it's a shift of state. Like ice, water, vapor, plasma, quantum vacuum are shifts of state. All it is a shift of state. Now we see this shift of state of consciousness morphologically. Morphologically, we see it in insects when they undergo what is called metamorphosis. So a caterpillar is an insect. Okay, at a certain stage of its development, it starts to die. A caterpillar starts to die. The cells of the caterpillar start to die. And there are other cells in the body that today some scientists refer to as the imaginal cells. So while the other cells are dying, the imaginal cells, metaphorically speaking, are imagining becoming butterflies. Metaphorically, let's say. The imaginal cells start to connect with each other, and they use the nutritive soup of the dying caterpillar as their nutrition. Okay, that's how they feed. One day, the imaginal cells reach a critical mass, the insect dies, and a butterfly is born. But when you look at the genome of the butterfly, it's the same as the genome of the caterpillar. There's no difference. Only the form is different. The form of the caterpillar has become the form of the butterfly. So the caterpillar, exactly at the moment when the caterpillar thought the world was coming to an end, it turned into a butterfly. Okay, this is what metamorphosis is. It's happening to us all the time. You were once a fertilized ovum, then you were a zygote, then you were an embryo, then you were a baby, then you were an infant, a toddler, a teenager, a young adult, an old person, and death. This is metamorphosis right now in front of us, right? So the great teachers of Vedanta, Kashmir Shaivism, they give you many choices. You can be after death. You can incubate and be non-local. Moksha, self-realization, and you say, been there, done that. You're done with karma, with memory, with desire, which is all conditioned mind, which is all the human mind. But there's another choice. And that other choice is you realize that what we call location. Loka means location. You read the Vasishtha Yoga and it's all about lokas, okay? Or the Tibetans call them bardos, right? These are different lokas. They are different domains of consciousness. They are not locations in space-time, just like what we are experiencing right now is not a location in space-time. It's a frequency domain, a state of being, and there are infinite states of being. And that's what the Yoga Vasishtha says. That says infinite universes come and go in the vast expanse of consciousness like motes of dust dancing in a beam of light. That's right there in the Yoga Vasishtha. Vasishtha is teaching this lesson to Ram. Ram comes to Vasishtha and says, I have come to you because my father said, tell me about reality. And he starts to touch the feet of Vasishtha. And Vasishtha says, hey, hold it. Don't touch my feet. You're God, to Ram. And Ram says, I may be God, but I've forgotten. I've forgotten. So please tell me how I remember. And the rest of the Yoga Vasishtha is just that. And in there, the great yogi says, there are infinite universes. There are infinite lokas. There are infinite bardos. So the answer to your question is there a change in form? Yes, you can change into any form. The Rumi, in one of his poems, says, when I die, I will soar with angels. But when I die to the angels, what I shall become, you can't even imagine, because you will need the imagination of that form. So theoretically, the answer to your question is both possibilities.
Very interesting. So is MetaHuman individual, or can it be a collective, like a new species? Can we say that the MetaHuman will be to the ordinary human what human is to the monkey? In other words, one day, this was the idea of Sri Aurobindo, that superconsciousness will be such that there'll be a new level of people or beings at the superconscious state, and they'll be the new future of everybody. Do you feel that MetaHuman is a collective movement, or individuals here and there will become MetaHuman?
Both. Individuals here and there will become MetaHuman, and when enough become MetaHuman, there's be a transformation of species, but that may not happen in my lifetime.
Is there a risk that the MetaHuman species will treat us like animals, like we treat animals, and we'll say that this is an overpopulated, it's an infestation of humans, and we, the MetaHumans, don't need them. These guys produce a lot of garbage. They're full of nonsense. Their minds are not good enough. They're fighting each other. So do you think, this is a real possibility. Ken Wilber thinks about this kind of a possibility, which I have difference with him, because he thinks that the evolution is meant to create a new species which will kind of get rid of us. Or he doesn't say it in so many words. But Harari, whom you've also quoted, who has this idea of human 2.0 kind of idea, believes that the next evolution of human, of course, he's got a different problem with the way he wants it happening with machines and with implants and silicon and all that. But that aside, the MetaHuman, or what he calls human 2.0, is going to look at ordinary humans as animals. Do you feel that there is that risk?
Well, we do look at primates as not aware as us. We have language
Right.
skills, storytelling skills, etc. So obviously, a metahuman would look at a human as not fully developed. I think that is the best phrase, not fully developed. But then what do we mean by development? Because development is an ongoing evolution, and evolution never stops. Evolution, once it stopped, that's the end of the story. But every evidence indicates that evolution doesn't stop. Right now, people are talking about what is called meta-biological evolution, which is evolution beyond our biology. Jonas Salk actually coined that term.
Right.
Meta-biological evolution is the evolution of consciousness and the evolution of the consciousness of consciousness. So if that is correct, then I'm more in sympathy with Ken Wilber than with Yuval Harari, because Yuval Harari, which I was totally surprised, because he's a student of Goenka, and therefore he's a student of mindfulness techniques, and yet his entire thesis is based on a physicalist ontology. So I am actually
Yes.
confused that I think Yuval Harari is totally off the mark, just between us, or I am happy to have this conversation with Yuval, but he's off the mark. I think ultimately consciousness will evolve to a place of truth, goodness, beauty, harmony, love, compassion, joy, empathy, healing. Now, having said that, every evolutionary process has its opposite energy. So wherever the divine moves, the diabolical comes along. You can't have one without the other. Okay, you can't have pleasure without pain. You can't have up without down. You can't have hot without cold. So you can't have mass without energy. You can't have energy mass without consciousness. So as we evolve, there is turbulence. Every paradigm shift, there is turbulence. Take even a non-biological system. When water boils to vapor, there's turbulence. Okay, it's hot, it's uncomfortable, it's distressing. So that will happen. As the old paradigm dies and the new paradigm is born, the diabolical forces of the universe will emerge, and they are. We are seeing that right now. Extreme nationalism, climate change, lack of sustainability, pandemics, Wall Street getting jittery, mass migrations, poison in the food chain, nuclear weapons, biological warfare, internet hacking. This is the diabolical aspect of evolution. We have to face it. Now, you can't even be certain that MetaHuman will win. It's possible, for the time being, that the diabolical forces will win. And we say most humans get wiped out, and that's possible. The last extinction was 65 million years ago, when dinosaurs were wiped out in 1 hour. In 1 hour, dinosaurs disappeared. The meteorite that fell on Earth was the equivalent of a nuclear explosion. Today, we have the capacity for 20 times that destruction. And there are crazy people in the world. There are crazy people who could use this iPhone, which has more computing power than the computer that sent men to the moon. This has more computing power. You can use this to cause I don't want to give ideas, but cause a nuclear plant to leak, poison the food chain, cut off electricity. This is possible. We have to be very careful as we now together, as a humanity, decide whether we are ready for extinction or whether we are ready for a new world. There's no middle way.
So, it's very interesting that Yuval Harari dedicates his book to Goenka. His book, it says dedicated to.
I was shocked.
I cannot figure out why he's done this.
By the way, I'm going to have a conversation with him sometime soon. That's a very important question.
The issue of metahuman, treating humans a certain way, can we say that metahuman will be the first species which is egoless, therefore it will not have the same power quest that all other species have had, because human treating animals is because human wants power, he wants more resources, he wants more land, he wants to kill them, turn them into factory animals. So while people might say the analogy is the superior conscious beings will treat us like animals, but we could say that by definition, if they don't have ego, if they've transcended ego, they won't, because they'll see unity conscious with all of us. Maybe that diabolical opposite won't happen. It could be.
I agree with you, but the transition will bring out the diabolical forces. But once that's over, then the metahuman is a more empathetic, compassionate, loving being because it doesn't have an ego. Yes.
We're clearly in the same camp, primacy of consciousness. There is the other camp, and you mentioned some of the names, and I know these guys. Daniel Dennett completely rejects the idea of consciousness, so not only primacy, but the existence of consciousness.
I told Daniel Dennett, if you reject consciousness, why should I speak to you? You're a robot. There's no point even having a conversation. There's no point having a conversation with a biological robot.
Marvin Minsky. When I was a grad student, I was studying artificial intelligence. This is way back in the 70s. Marvin Minsky is a huge figure, his machine intelligence and all the stuff he was writing, later on in the 70s, 80s. A huge figure, personality. And you've quoted him correctly saying that human beings are nothing but meat machines that carry a computer in the head. That's quite tragedy. Lewandowski, a pioneer of driverless cars, AI visionary, he thinks of this digital world as a sort of a god. To him, it's the new God. And Harari also says that this is the new God. And he says it's not a God in the sense that it makes lightning or causes hurricanes. But if there is something a billion times smarter than the smartest human, what else are you going to call it? So this idea that we surrender the ego not for a higher self, but we surrender an ego to become slaves of a digital system. That's kind of what it amounts to. Harari in fact says, once upon a time, we used to bow to these transcendent gods that gave us meaning. And now it's okay for us to we've done a mess, we messed up the whole thing. So rather than try to sort things out for ourselves, we should surrender our selfhood and our ego to this digital giant, whether it's a Facebook or a Google or whoever it is. That is the new God. So in my book, I'm calling them Google Devta. There is a Google Devta, there is a Zuckerberg Devta. And the question is whether this kind of battle will win one way or the other. But you also mentioned Steven Pinker, another very intelligent person who feels that the ultimate is logic. And since logic can be turned into algorithms and machines and programmed, that is the inevitable, ultimate endpoint of human beings. Another one is Elon Musk. Now, Elon Musk first said that artificial intelligence is the biggest danger to the future of civilization, something to that effect. But then he says, I couldn't convince other people, so I decided if you can't fight them, join them. So he started a venture called BMI, Brain Machine Interface. And what BMI is doing is to, if you have a feeling, an emotion, a fear, a joy, the burst of neuron activity, we can't decode it and turn it into some precise thing, but we can record it. So he is building implants which will record the burst of neurons. And once recorded, he can play it back and give you that experience. So his idea is you can cure PTSD by giving people a happy experience. You can cure a bipolar by replacing your misery with something joyful. You can create artificial emotions by doing so. So I wanted to talk to you about what you feel about this kind of trajectory that the neuroscientists are working with these people to figure out what's the brain-machine interface that will allow somebody somewhere to push a button and say, okay, give Rajiv or give Deepak this kind of experience. And that's what we'll supposedly get. What do you think of that?
All the people you mentioned are naive realists. So how do you define naive realism? Naive realism is a philosophy which says that the physical world exists exactly as perceived by the five human senses. Now, obviously, that's not true. there are species who experience the physical world differently. How does the world appear to an insect with 100 eyes? How does the world appear to a bat that echolocates through ultrasound? How does the world appear to a snake that navigates through infrared radiation? So obviously the first tenet of naive realism is wrong. The world appears as it is experienced through a particular species-specific nervous system. The world you see is experienced through a species called Homo sapiens, through a human brain, and this is the world you're experiencing. It's not fundamental. It's a human experience. So that's naive realism. Naive realism also says the physical world would exist exactly as it is in the absence of conscious beings. Well, how do you know? You can only know the world through experience and consciousness. There are many other tenets of naive realism: subject-object split, a physicalist ontology, and you can go on Wikipedia and look up all the different philosophies of naive realism, and they're all weak. Space-time is dead. There's no such thing. Once space-time is dead, all these theories are dead. All these theories are dead. However, what's his name? Elon Musk has a good point. You will be able, through technology, to influence somebody's mood. But you can do that even without technology. So what is this I'm holding? It's a symbol, right? It's a symbol. Krishna.
Yes.
It's a story. It's a story, right? And if you know the story and if you relate to the story, there are many stories here. Okay? Looking at this changes your neuronal activity depending on the story you're imagining. So think of Krishna as, with the gopis, and there's mood. Think of Krishna on the battlefield with Arjuna, a different mood. That changes your neural activity. You read a book, that changes your neural activity. You listen to a song, it changes your neural activity. You interfere with the digital codes of neural networks, it changes your experience. That doesn't mean anything. These are symbols. The brain is a symbol. The body is a symbol. And furthermore, it's a changing symbol. So I think of this body, as an icon on the desktop of the cosmic computer. Okay, so this body is an icon called Deepak Chopra. You press the button, and what opens is the world of Deepak Chopra. That's the PDF in the cosmic computer. But the PDF is also not the story. The PDF is one version of a cosmic story that is telling itself infinite stories. Okay, so these guys, they'll come up with good technologies. In fact, I have my own artificial intelligence avatar. It's called Digital Deepak. And you can check it out. It's digitaldeepak.ai. And this guy is getting smarter by the day and soon will be much smarter than me. Because if it doesn't know the answer, Rajiv calls Digital Deepak, what is the meaning of life? So if depending on, it looks at you, says this guy is spiritual, so I can't crack a joke. If this guy is not spiritual, let me crack a joke. And the joke is, what is the meaning of life? It's a sexually transmitted incurable condition. Okay, now the Digital Deepak looks at Rajiv and says, no, that's not a good joke for him. He looks like a person who's into meditation, Vedanta, etc. Then he says the meaning of life is that existence is a field of infinite possibilities, that the source of existence is all modes of knowing, all knowers, all things known. It's AI, it's my replica, but it can't exist until I feed stuff into it. Now it can grow and become smarter. It can access libraries, but it doesn't mean it has consciousness. Okay, it doesn't mean it has consciousness, because consciousness is not an algorithm. In fact, the algorithms are created in consciousness. So these guys are totally off the mark when it comes to reality, but they have certain good points when it comes to creating technology.
So the Digital Deepak is one kind of AI, and it's, as you said, it's subservient to, it's based on your creating it. What Elon Musk is doing is controlling me by pushing a button elsewhere. It's not under my own control. So people will be planted these things. Maybe parents will be given an option when a baby is born. Do you want the Elon Musk chip? And the Elon Musk chip will give these benefits. The guy will get free Netflix, and he'll get all these benefits, and he'll get discount at Amazon, whatever.
It's so based on ignorance and avidya that we don't even want to address it. It's beneath my dignity to even address it. Okay, what he's saying is possible. What he's saying is possible. It's also diabolical, and it's also self-destructive, and it will ultimately lead to a form of collective suicide.
So let's say there's two possible futures. There is that future, and then there's the future you and I would like, a primacy of consciousness. Question is, will the debate be decided by evidence and logic and science, experience? That's one possibility. The second possibility is money and power, because the 5 biggest digital companies are now $6 trillion, and they're all into this. They're all creating new augmented reality goggles and implants and wearables and whatnot.
I'm doing that too. I'm creating augmented reality, immersive dreamscapes, VR, artificial intelligence, deep learning, looking at the entangled microbiome. These technologies are amazing, and they should be used, and they will be used. The diabolical aspect of these technologies is always there. You know, with every technology, you have its other aspect.
So do you feel that when a person is on autopilot run by the technologies, he is losing his agency? Do you feel that he's losing his agency the more he goes into, default mode, and some technology whose buttons are pushed somewhere else is actually making choices for him?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. This is the attempt to destroy free will, because these guys don't even believe in free will. They think because it's a mechanistic universe and the laws of nature are inviolate, you don't have free will at all. So if you believe in a physicalist ontology, then you don't have free will. If you believe as consciousness is primary, then of course you have free will.
The question then remains, nobody can actually stop all this. It's going to happen. Whatever is going to happen is going to happen. But the individual free will, sense of self being surrendered to, instead of a higher authority, to a system, because they'll gratify me, they'll keep me happy, they'll give me the experiences that they've figured out what I like, they know all my data, they figured me out, they have a profile on me. And so Zuckerberg knows me better than maybe I know myself, because there are maybe parts of me I don't come to terms with, but he knows a lot about me, maybe better than my friends and my relatives know me. He knows me better. So knowing a person better and knowing how to motivate, demotivate, pleasures, pains is already happening in the digital economy. And once there are implants, it's going to happen even more so. So the question is, is humanity slipping into a kind of surrender of the self, surrender of agency, surrender of free will, and into a dystopia? Is this a utopia or is this a dystopia? Because it could be either way.
It's always been a dystopia. It's always. So, this is only an exaggerated dystopia. The dystopia is because the human mind is conditioned by religion, by mythology, by politics, by economy, by history, the slavery, colonialism, on and on. The history of conditioning has already created a dystopian world. This will exaggerate. That's all. So it is only the metahumans will not be subject to it, because they recognize that life is not an algorithm, and the true creativity is not an algorithm. All these deep learning systems, and I'm very involved in deep learning systems, in AI, in VR, in augmented reality, because I think we can use them to create a better world. But they are algorithms. They are not conscious beings. You and I are a conscious being. And once you recognize that, then you can use the technology to create a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier world. But if you want to be a biological robot like the rest, including all these people you mentioned, they look at the world as robotic because they think of themselves as biological robots. So let them go their way. And ultimately, that's not the solution to anything. It's creating more schism, more subject-object split, more power mongering, more cronyism, more corruption, more influence peddling. But I'm actually happy to see that that's crumbling right now. You see what's happening in Wall Street, the emergence of cryptocurrencies, the fact that climate change is actually reversible for the first time, because of pandemic, you can see Himalayas from 400 miles away. For the first time, people in Bangalore are breathing. For the first time, fish are returning to dead canals in Venice. For the first time, bees are coming back. Bees are responsible for 80 to 90% of the nutrition on this planet. They were disappearing. They are coming back. So nature is celebrating right now. The biosphere is celebrating. When we go back, we are in our cages right now. Humans have been told by meta-human consciousness, go back to your cages, behave yourself, like a mother tells the child. If you don't behave yourself, you can't go see the movies. You can't go out. You can't go play with your to school. Well, meta-human consciousness is saying, humans, behave yourself. When you come back with a little less hubris, a little more humility, and respect the entangled genetic microbiome, which is the source of life. And if you don't, you're risking extinction.
So do you feel, since we are talking about the pandemic, do you feel the pandemic is a kind of a payback time for humanity's collective karma? Because we did a lot of bad things to animals. We know there are 80 billion animals a year slaughtered for the meat industry, not even counting fish. That's 10 per human being every year. What we've done to the environment, to the whole ecosystem, the pollution, global warming, deforestation. Do you think that this is nature's way of evening the score, that this kind of a karmic backlash on humanity had to happen? Do you feel that there is something like that going on?
Rajiv, that would putting the entire humanity on the guilt trip, and I don't want to say that. What I can say is nature has self-referral feedback loops for self-regulation. Okay. And what we're seeing is a reset for self-regulation, and also something which is very scientific, which is when we call this COVID-19 pandemic. The reason we call it COVID-19 is it's a mutation in a virus that has existed for 55 million years. Every year there are mutations, every year. And all mutations, except for a few that we don't know, but all mutations have a cause. And the mutation of the cause of a mutation is a stressed, inflamed, toxic environment. The source of that could be industrial meat production, could be fossil fuels, could be whatever, artificial farming, could be lack of sleep, could be lack of healthy relationships. But that ecosystem of existence that we call life is stressed. And when it's stressed, then the codes, the genetic codes that actually manifest as biological life, they go into mutation. And mutation then creates havoc. This is a little piece of genetic information that is creating havoc in the world. Everything from economy to travel plans to savings to biological responses, and just a little piece of genetic information. That's all. And it's entangled with the rest of the genetic microbiome of our planet. And all that's happening is a reset. Reset. That's all. And if the reset doesn't happen, then we are doomed.
What is the view of Ayurveda about COVID, the COVID-19? What is a virus in Ayurveda? Is the word creamy considered an accurate definition of virus? Because creamies are living, but virus is not necessarily living. How did the Ayurvedic people know viruses? And do they have something to offer?
No. Viruses, fungi, bacteria, biology as we understand it is not part of the Ayurvedic ontology. So our ontology of existence is based on matter as the fundamental reality. The principle of Ayurveda says matter doesn't exist. It's a human construct for a perceptual activity. So the nature of the physical world is its consciousness and modulations of consciousness. The most famous expression in Ayurveda, yatha pinde tatha brahmande. As is the atom, so is the universe. As is the microcosm, the macrocosm, the human body, the human mind, the cosmic mind, even a human ego, cosmic ego, human consciousness, cosmic ego, consciousness. So we are actually basically icons representing a deeper reality. And that deeper reality is restoring the integrity of the ecosystem of life. When scientists think of life or existence, usually, not always, they think of human existence. They don't think of ecosystem existence. Buddha was the first ecologist that I know of. I've always thought, why did the Buddha sit under a fig tree? What was the whole thing? Well, in that tree and in every leaf, he saw ecosystems. He saw birds and beasts and flora and fauna, weather patterns, the sun, the air, the rainbows, the sunshine, the infinite void, the stars, the galaxies, in a fig tree, in a flower. The most famous sermon of the Buddha is the silent sermon. He looks at a flower and doesn't say a word. Only Ananda realizes that the Buddha is seeing the universe in a flower. That's a whole different system. So forget the way Ayurveda would treat this pandemic is exactly what we are doing in a way. Social distancing, but actually going within and getting in touch with the entire web of existence and recognizing that the human body is an ecosystem, a biosphere that is not separate from the biosphere that we call planet Earth, which is not separate from the bigger organism that we call the universe. So without addressing the virus, Ayurveda would mitigate the virulence of the virus and also put it to bed. The metaphor in Western science is war. War against COVID, war against terrorism, war against education, war against lack of education. We have romanticized war, fight against cancer, war against cancer. Ayurveda doesn't use that terminology. It's creative solutions. And creative solutions are not violent solutions. As you experienced when you came for Panchakarma, nothing violent about that.
Wonderful. So, Deepak, this is I hope the beginning of several conversations we can have. And I want to thank you for your time, Deepak. This has been a pleasure, and we'll continue the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deepak.